Over the last few weeks, I'm sure you've all heard about the 15-year-old African schoolgirl who was strip searched by the Metropolitan Police after her teachers suspected that she was dealing drugs in the school.
All across our mainstream media platforms, we have seen countless publications detailing the outrage of the public that a black girl had been searched. Protests have taken place, politicians have been calling for accountability for the officers involved. The IOPC and Scotland Yard rapidly opened investigations for misconduct. Police have been removed from frontline duties and teachers have been sacked.
The law and policy that governs the strip searches of minors is very variable and open to interpretation. My personal stance on police powers of strip searching and the forcible stripping of detainees is obviously not one of full support, as I'm aware of how they like to abuse these powers to cause psychological harm and try to incite a reaction in some of their victims. However, there are circumstances where these kinds of searches would be proportionate and necessary. For example, if somebody was suspected of carrying dangerous contraband into a school, putting the safety and welfare of staff and pupils at risk, or if somebody was accused of carrying an offensive weapon like knives. And we have seen a growing problem in our schools, particularly in our inner cities and towns that are heavily occupied by foreign populations at this time, with gang, drug and knife-related violence. In Manchester, 2 weeks ago, an 11-year-old girl was stabbed in school. In London, in a recent survey, 10-year-olds were saying that they were scared that they might be stabbed on their way to, during, or even on their walk home from school. Last year, I read about a 14-year-old boy in Manchester who was stabbed through the neck while sitting an exam in front of his teachers and classmates. And it's an undeniable fact that there is a statistical correlation between certain foreign communities in Great Britain and these offences. It's not racist to point out this fact, or is it racist to utilise our police resources to challenge these issues in the communities where they're most prevalent? However, what is racist is this massive disparity that we've seen in the outrage when you compare how people have reacted to one black girl being strip searched in comparison to up to 1 million white British schoolchildren being raped
on an industrial scale by large, organised, religiously and racially motivated gangs of adult foreign men, mostly from South Asia and Africa, up and down our country. Let that sink in. Up to 1 million white children have been repeatedly raped, gang raped, beaten, some even tortured and murdered by racially motivated gangs of adult foreign men. Some of these child victims are as young as 8. Our police, local authorities, schools, social services not only knew, as many of these terrified child victims went to them for help and protection, but these authorities actively facilitated these crimes, allowed these foreign gangs to attack and abuse white children with impunity, and actively, continuously, have perverted the course of justice to cover up the scale of this mass-targeted, racially motivated assault of white children and their own participation in these crimes. These child victims, instead of protection and justice, were told to shut up, that it was their choice, that the crimes were not serious enough to be investigated. Our corrupt constabulary has often arrested victims and their family members on malicious charges, such as disorderly conduct, for reporting these offences. Child victims have been stripped, beaten, locked in cells by our police as punishment for reporting being raped. Where's the outrage? Where are the protests? Not a single officer, social worker, teacher, politician guilty of covering up and facilitating these offences has faced any accountability. In the last few weeks, an investigation into South Yorkshire Police concluded with not a single officer who had allowed these racially motivated child rapists to operate with impunity has been sacked or removed from their duties. No one has been held accountable as of yet.
These same people who express this disgust and outrage at this 15-year-old black girl being strip searched will simultaneously claim that the mass-targeted, religiously and racially motivated rape, torture and even murder of white British schoolchildren is an acceptable compromise to live in a diverse society. They talk of the trauma of this African girl after her being strip searched, and yet at the same time will tell white child victims of sexual slavery, torture and unimaginable abuse to shut up for the sake of diversity. Well, I want to show you a video, an interview with a young girl who was forced to go to a diverse school in the north of England to give you an insight into the daily trauma that they have to experience.
Can you just tell me how old you are, please?
14.
And you go to a local school?
Yeah.
Have you lived in this area all your life?
Yeah.
You're having problems at school. Can you just elaborate on the kind of problems that you're having?
Asian boys coming up to me and saying, I'm going to rape you, and if you don't go with me, I'm going to punch you in the face with a knuckle duster, and if you don't, give me a blowjob.
And this is happening at the school to several girls, is it? It's not an individual case?
No, it's happening to lots of girls.
Do you think the teachers and the authorities are aware of this?
Yeah.
I mean, you're probably aware that the Edge of the City programme focused on young girls like yourself who are being targeted by Asians to be groomed in this particular area. Do you think that was an accurate description of what is happening?
Yes.
Have you contacted the police regarding them threatening to rape you?
Yeah.
And what's the police response has been?
They said that they're going to look into it.
And that is it?
Yeah.
What's your teacher's response been?
The pupils are going to get excluded for 15 school days.
Right, and that is it?
Yeah.
There's also the accusation that young Asian males are hanging outside schools in flash cars, basically intimidating young girls like yourself with threats. Is that the case?
Yeah.
And this is happening, what, once a week, twice a week?
Every day.
Every day?
Yeah.
And the authorities know it's happening, but they're not doing anything about it? And how do you feel when you're targeted by these people?
I feel intimidated by them and scared.
Well, we all know that these religiously and racially motivated offences against white children have gone on for decades and been ignored, that people in positions of state authority have exploited those positions to cover up the existence of these crimes and their involvement in them. Even with the scale of these atrocities being exposed and the complicit nature of many of those in positions of state authority, nobody seems to be getting held to account. Not these police officers, not the teachers, not the social workers, not the local authorities. And an apology without change is just manipulation, and accountability without consequence is meaningless. The media would like to manipulate you into believing that it's more of an atrocity that a black girl that comes from a community that has a propensity towards criminal activity being strip searched is more outrageous than up to 1 million white British schoolchildren being raped, tortured, and in some cases murdered by religiously and racially motivated gangs of adult men, and our police being complicit in perverting the course of justice in these crimes. They claim that investigating into and reporting on these racially motivated offences against white children would stir up racial tensions and racial animosity, yet they use every opportunity that they can get. Any event involving a black person that's even remotely negative, they will try to portray it as an act of racism to stir up animosity towards the indigenous white population. Well, I don't know why we tolerate this obvious bias within our media, why we don't speak out about this disparity and outrage depending on the racial characteristics of the children involved. Why are people more offended by a black girl being strip searched than up to 1 million white children being raped in what is racially and religiously motivated acts of genocide under Definition B of the Genocide Convention, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of any unique racial, ethnic, national or religious group, which these children qualify for all of those protected characteristics. And I don't think anybody is going to argue with me that repeatedly gang-raping children is not going to cause them serious bodily or mental harm. It's time that we stood up for these white kids who have long been neglected and abused in a multicultural hell of intimidation and sexual assault, which has gone completely ignored by our authorities who have been complicit in these crimes. I urge you to write to your MPs and to form local groups to protect vulnerable children and to assist those who have already been affected. But most importantly, protect your white children. Make them racially aware and ensure you keep them away from hostile foreign people and diverse environments.